Do you know the scent of total ruin? For the Sterling family, it was not smoke or burning bankruptcy papers. It was Chanel No. 5 mixed with raw, primal panic broadcast live to millions. They tossed my clothes to make space for a rich mistress, forgetting I controlled the very pills keeping them beautiful. By kicking me out, they triggered a time bomb in their own stomachs. Let me tell you how New York's elite lost everything, literally and figuratively. My name is Priya Lancaster. At 32 years old, I have spent the better part of a decade perfecting the art of invisibility, hiding my intellect behind the shining, polished facade of the Sterling family name. To the world, I am merely the lucky African-American woman who married into the Sterling dynasty, a family that considers itself the East Coast equivalent of royalty. But inside the high-tech laboratories of Zenith Nutrition, I am the lead pharmacist and the head of research and development. I am the one who formulates the very compounds that keep my mother-in-law's skin taut and my husband's energy levels artificially high. I calculate the macros, I balance the pH levels, and I design the chemical illusions that they sell to the world as natural perfection. They are the face of Zenith, but I am its brain, its blood, and its spine. I had been in Seattle for 5 grueling days, meeting with suppliers to secure organic compounds for our upcoming product launch. It was a trip that should have taken 2 weeks, but I compressed it, driven by a foolish, aching desire to get home to my husband, Preston. The flight back was a red-eye, and I landed at JFK just as the sun was beginning to bleed a pale, bruised purple across the horizon. My body was humming with the specific fatigue of jet lag and overwork, but my mind was quiet, anticipating the soft, thread-count embrace of my own bed, and perhaps, if I was lucky, the drowsy warmth of Preston reaching for me as I slipped under the covers. The drive to Connecticut took 2 hours, as I steered my car through the iron gates of the Sterling estate. The morning mist was still clinging to the manicured hedges. The house stood like a fortress of limestone and old money, imposing and silent. It was a structure designed to intimidate, not to welcome, but after 5 years of marriage, I had deluded myself into thinking it was home. I parked my car, grabbing my travel bag and the garment bag containing the prototype samples I had guarded with my life. The house was eerily quiet when I entered. The staff usually began their rounds by 7 in the morning, but the hallways were empty. The air smelled different. Usually, the house smelled of the white tea and time diffuser blend I had specifically curated to promote cognitive function and relaxation. Today, however, the air was thick with something cloying and floral, a heavy synthetic rose scent that caught in the back of my throat. It was the first discordant note in a symphony I thought I had memorized. I ascended the grand staircase, my heels making no sound on the plush runner. I wanted to surprise Preston. I imagined his smile, that boyish curve of his lips that had charmed me when we were both doctoral candidates. Before the weight of his family's expectations crushed the gentleness out of him, I reached the double doors of the master suite and pushed them open. The room was dark, the blackout curtains still drawn against the morning light. The bed was made, which was strange. Preston was a restless sleeper, and usually, at this hour, the sheets would be a tangled mess of Egyptian cotton. Perhaps he had risen early for golf with his father. I sighed, letting my shoulders drop, and walked toward the walk-in closet. This closet was my sanctuary, in a house that belonged entirely to my in-laws' taste, full of cold marble and sharp angles. This space was mine. It was a room in itself, climate-controlled and organized with the same meticulous precision I applied to my chemical formulas. On the left were my neutrals, the bespoke beige and charcoal suits I wore to board meetings to project authority without threatening the fragile egos of the male executives. On the right were my evening gowns, silk and velvet, chosen to complement my deep skin tone, and in the far back, preserved in an archival bag, was my wedding dress. It was a simple, architectural piece that I had bought with my own savings, a symbol of the day I thought I had gained a family. I opened the door and reached for the light switch. The banks of halogen lights flickered on, illuminating the space. I blinked, confused. I took a step back, convinced for a split second that I had walked into the wrong room, or perhaps woken up in a different house entirely. My side of the closet was gone. It was not just empty. It had been colonized. Where my tailored blazers usually hung in military precision, there was now an explosion of neon. Rows of hangers were jammed with garments that screamed for attention. There were leopard print coats with fur collars that looked synthetic and cheap, despite clearly being designer. There were dresses covered in sequins so dense they looked like armor, in shades of electric blue and hot pink that hurt the eyes. I walked forward, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch a hanger. It was a size 0. I am a size 6. These were not my clothes. I spun around, scanning the shelves, my shoe collection, my sensible loafers, my running shoes, the classic pumps I had saved for months to buy when I got my first paycheck, was gone. In their place were rows of platform heels with red soles, strappy sandals that looked impossible to walk in, and boots covered in crystals. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a cold, erratic rhythm. I ran to the back of the closet, to the special cedar-lined section where I kept my wedding dress. It was empty. The archival bag was gone. The hanger was gone. It was as if the dress, and the memory of the woman who wore it, had never existed. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. I gripped the edge of the island counter in the center of the closet to steady myself. On the counter, where I usually kept a tray for my watch and earrings, there was a stack of fashion magazines and a half-empty bottle of perfume. I picked up the bottle. It was a heavy, sweet scent, the same cloying smell that had greeted me at the door. "You are back early." The voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. I turned around. Victoria Sterling stood in the doorway of the closet. My mother-in-law looked, as always, immaculate. She was wearing a silk morning robe that cost more than my first car, her silver hair coiffed into a perfect, immovable helmet. Her skin was glowing, a testament to the collagen peptides and antioxidants I had spent 3 years refining for her morning smoothie. She did not look happy to see me. She looked annoyed, like one might look at a stain on a rug that refused to come out. "Where are my clothes, Victoria?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. "Where is my wedding dress?" Victoria walked into the closet, running a manicured hand over the sleeve of a garish neon pink jacket hanging where my gray wool blazer used to be. She sighed, a sound of profound boredom. "We are restructuring," she said, as if she were talking about a corporate merger and not my personal property. "We decided it was time for an update. The house felt stagnant." "Stagnant?" I repeated. "You cleared out my entire wardrobe. You threw away my wedding dress. That is not restructuring. Victoria, that is theft." She turned to face me, her eyes cold and hard as diamonds. "Do not be dramatic, Priya. It does not suit you. And honestly, neither did those clothes. They were so dreary, so utilitarian. Zenith Nutrition is entering a new era. We are pivoting to a younger, more vibrant demographic. We need color. We need life. Your wardrobe was frankly depressing. It screamed lab assistant, not Zenith family member." I stared at her, unable to process the sheer audacity. "So you threw them away?" "We donated them," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand, "to a charity for underprivileged women entering the workforce. You should be pleased. Your dull little suits will finally serve a purpose. Besides, we needed the space." "Space for what?" I gestured wildly at the racks of alien clothing. "Who wears this? This isn't me. You know I don't wear animal print." Victoria smiled, a thin, tight expression that did not reach her eyes. "No, you don't, but Bella does." The name hung in the air between us. Bella. My mind raced, connecting the dots faster than I wanted to. Bella Sinclair, the daughter of Robert Sinclair, the Texas oil tycoon, the man whose venture capital firm Zenith had been desperately courting for 6 months to cover the massive holes in the company's balance sheet. I had seen her face in the tabloids, a socialite known for her parties, her scandals, and her vacuous Instagram stories. "Bella Sinclair?" I asked, a sick feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. "Why is Bella Sinclair's wardrobe in my bedroom?" "She is staying with us for a few weeks," Victoria said, smoothing the lapel of the pink jacket. "To understand the brand, to feel the synergy. Robert wants to ensure his investment is in good hands. He wants to see that we are a family that understands luxury, lifestyle, and appeal. Bella needs to feel at home here." "So you gave her my closet?" I whispered. "We gave her the master suite," Victoria corrected, her voice sharp. "She is accustomed to a certain level of comfort, and frankly, Priya, you are hardly ever here. You are always in the lab or on these trips. It seemed wasteful to keep this space reserved for your minimalism." I felt the blood drain from my face. "This is my room. I sleep here, with my husband." As if on cue. Footsteps approached from the bathroom. Preston walked in. He was freshly showered, a towel wrapped around his waist, water droplets clinging to his chest. He looked healthy, vibrant, another testament to my work. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He didn't rush to hug me. He stopped, looking from me to his mother, his expression shifting from surprise to a guarded irritation. "Priya," he said, "you're back. I thought you were landing tonight." "I took an earlier flight," I said, looking at him, searching for some sign of outrage on my behalf. "Preston, your mother threw out my clothes. She gave our closet to Bella Sinclair." Preston ran a hand through his damp hair. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor, then at the rows of sequined dresses. "Look, Priya, let's not make a scene. Mother and I talked about it. It's just a temporary arrangement." "Temporary?" I stepped toward him. "She donated my wedding dress. Preston, that's not temporary. That is erasure." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were void of any empathy. They were the eyes of a man who had already made a calculation and decided I was on the wrong side of the equation. Please, be realistic. You know how important the Sinclair investment is. The company is in a delicate position. If Bella feels comfortable, her father signs the check. If she feels like a guest, he walks. She has a lot of luggage. She needed the walk-in. "And where am I supposed to put my things?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" "The guest room down the hall is perfectly comfortable," Victoria interjected smoothly. "The one with the garden view? It's quiet. Perfect for you to rest after your travels." "You want me to sleep in the guest room?" I looked at Preston, begging him to step in, to be the man I thought I married. "Preston, this is our marriage. This is our home," Preston sighed, a sound of long-suffering patience. "It's just business. Priya, don't take it so personally. Bella is vibrant. She takes up a lot of space. She's going to be shadowing the team, being the face of the new campaign. We need to accommodate her." "Shadowing the team?" I asked. "She has a degree in fashion marketing from a school that doesn't exist anymore. I run the RD department." "Exactly," Victoria said. "You run the lab. You stay in the back, mixing your powders. Bella belongs out front, and she belongs in this room. She embodies the Zenith lifestyle." I looked at the clothes again. The leopard print, the neon, it wasn't just bad taste. It was a statement. It was a uniform for a different kind of woman. A woman who was loud, rich, and served a purpose that I apparently no longer did. "She's not just staying here, is she?" I asked, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. The specific way Preston was standing, shielding his body slightly as if avoiding my touch. The total removal of my existence from the room. "You didn't just replace my clothes." Preston looked away, his jaw tightening. "She's a friend of the family. Priya, she's a partner. Stop being paranoid." "I am a pharmacist. Preston," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "I deal in precise measurements and chemical reactions. I know when a mixture has been altered. You aren't just making space for a guest. You are clearing the decks." Victoria stepped forward, placing a hand on Preston's arm, a gesture of solidarity that excluded me entirely. We are doing what is best for the family legacy. Priya, if you are truly part of this family, you will understand that sacrifices must be made. Your clothes were a small price to pay for the future of this empire. And what about me? I asked. Am I a small price too? Preston finally met my gaze. There was no love in his eyes, only a cold, pragmatic calculation. Bella will be here for a few weeks to vet the partnership. She needs space. Just go to the guest room. Priya, get some sleep. You look tired. You look old. The words hung there. You look old. I looked at him, the man whose cholesterol I managed, whose testosterone levels I optimized, whose very vitality was a product of my intellect. And then I looked at the gaudy, expensive clothes of the 24-year-old heiress that now occupied my space. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The scientist in me took over. I was observing a phenomenon. I was witnessing the breakdown of a system. I realized then that they hadn't just thrown out my clothes. They had thrown out me. They just hadn't filled out the paperwork yet. Fine, I said. The word was soft, barely a whisper. I turned around and walked out of the master suite, leaving my husband and his mother standing amidst the glittering, tacky armor of my replacement. I walked down the hall to the guest room, carrying my bag of samples. They thought they had stripped me of my power by taking my suits and my dresses. They thought they could dismiss me to the guest room like an unwanted servant. But as I closed the door to the cold, impersonal guest room, I looked down at the bag in my hand. Inside were the prototypes for the new Zenith line. The formulas were in my head. The science was in my blood. They had kept the clothes, but they had forgotten that I was the one who made the clothes fit. I was the one who kept them thin enough, young enough, and energetic enough to wear them. They had replaced the wife. But they had forgotten that they still needed the pharmacist. And that was a variable they had severely miscalculated. The summons to dinner came via a text message from my husband. Sent from a room less than 40 feet away, it read simply, "Come downstairs. Be normal. Dad wants to show a united front." It was the kind of digital command one sends to a misbehaving teenager or a recalcitrant employee. Not the woman whose name was on the joint checking account. I smoothed the fabric of the simple black dress I had pulled from the back of the guest closet, one of the few things Victoria deemed too boring to steal, and descended the stairs. I felt less like a wife, and more like a ghost haunting my own life, invisible until I was required to move a chair or validate a lie. The dining room was a theater of the absurd. The crystal chandelier, which I had personally selected 3 years ago for its refraction index, cast a harsh interrogation room light over the table. The Sterling family was arranged in a tableau of desperate opulence. My father-in-law, Arthur, sat at the head, his face flushed with the specific ruddy hue of high blood pressure and expensive scotch. My sister-in-law, Madison, was scrolling through her phone, likely checking her engagement metrics, looking bored and expensive. And there, in the seat opposite Arthur, my seat, the hostess's seat, sat Bella Sinclair. If the morning's wardrobe theft had been a slap in the face, this was a knife to the gut. Bella was draped in a silver sequined dress that looked like it was made of liquid mercury, a garment that cost more than my student loans. But it was not the dress that made my breath hitch in my throat. It was what was resting against her clavicle. Strung around Bella's neck was a single strand of South Sea pearls. They were creamy, irregular, and imperfectly perfect. They had belonged to my grandmother, a woman who scrubbed floors for 50 years so her daughter could go to college. I had kept them in a velvet box inside my safe, or at least, I thought it was a safe, apparently, to the Sterlings. Safe was just a word for storage for the next upgrade. I walked to the table, my heels clicking on the parquet floor. No one looked up. It was a fascinating display of social conditioning. If they ignored me hard enough, perhaps I would cease to be real. "You're late," Victoria said, not looking away from Bella. She was seated to Bella's right, pouring wine with a deference she usually reserved for royalty. "I was trying to find a hairbrush," I said, my voice steady, my eyes locked on the pearls around Bella's neck. since mine seemed to have been relocated to a landfill. Bella looked up then, her eyes wide and feignedly innocent. She touched the pearls, her fingers caressing the nacre that contained my family's sweat and history. "Oh, do you like them?" Victoria found them in a dusty old box. We thought they added a touch of vintage charm. A bit rustic, but cute. Rustic? My grandmother's legacy was rustic. "They are beautiful," I said, pulling out the only empty chair, a folding chair placed awkwardly at the corner of the table, clearly an afterthought. "They belong to my grandmother." "Really?" Bella laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Well, they look much better out in the light, don't they? Jewelry is meant to be worn, not hoarded." Arthur cleared his throat, a rumble of impatience. "Enough about the jewelry. We have business to discuss. Bella was just telling us about the transfer." "Yes," Bella beamed, leaning forward, giving Preston, who was sitting next to her, a view down her dress that required no imagination. "Daddy is ready to wire the first tranche, $50 million. He believes in the vision. He believes in Zenith Glow." "Yeah, 50 million, Arthur repeated, savoring the words like a fine steak. "That changes everything. We can finally pay off the existing obligations." I picked up my water glass. "You mean the debt?" I said. "The $12 million in bridge loans you took out to pay for the Aspen house and the yacht refit?" The table went silent. Arthur turned to me, his face turning a shade of purple that suggested his systolic pressure was nearing 180. "Priya," he hissed, "do not ruin this." "I am just clarifying the allocation of funds," I said, taking a sip. "As a shareholder." "You are an employee," Madison chimed in, not looking up from her phone. "And barely that, considering how saggy you look today. Have you stopped taking the supplements? You look gray." Bella leaned in, scrutinizing my face with mock concern. "Oh, wow, she's right. Your pores are huge. And is that hyperpigmentation? You really should try the new Zenith line, when it launches, of course. We wouldn't want you using the prototypes. They are for the talent." The irony was so thick I could practically chew it. I was the one who formulated the retinoid complex she was talking about. I was the one who adjusted the molecular weight of the hyaluronic acid so it would actually penetrate the dermis. They were lecturing the architect on how to lay bricks. "I am tired," I said simply. "It has been a long flight." "Well, try to look alive," Preston said. He was cutting his steak with aggressive precision. "We need this dinner to go smoothly. Bella is doing us a huge favor. She is here to save the company." He reached out and placed his hand over Bella's hand, the one resting on the tablecloth. It wasn't a quick pat. It was a lingering, intimate squeeze. He rubbed his thumb over her knuckles. "We are all making sacrifices for the greater good. Priya, try to be a team player." I looked at his hand on hers. I looked at the pearls on her neck. I looked at the food on their plates, a kale and quinoa salad with grilled salmon, a menu I had designed specifically to lower Arthur's triglycerides and boost Victoria's collagen production. I was feeding them, I was keeping them alive, and they were eating my food while dismantling my life. "So," Bella said, turning her attention back to Preston, ignoring me completely. "For the launch party, I was thinking we need more wow factor. The science stuff is boring. No one cares about molecules. They care about the vibe. I want champagne towers. I want acrobats. I want to arrive on a white horse." "A white horse?" I asked. "Inside the ballroom?" "It's a metaphor." "Priya," Victoria snapped. "God, you are so literal. This is why you stay in the lab. You have zero imagination." "I have enough imagination to know that a horse in a food service area is a health code violation," I noted. "We will pay the fine." Arthur waved his hand dismissively. "With Bella's investment, we can pay any fine we want." The dinner dragged on. I watched them eat. I watched them preen. They were hollow. All of them. Beautiful. Polished shells with nothing inside but greed and insecurity. Arthur was terrified of poverty. Victoria was terrified of aging. Preston was terrified of his father, and Madison was terrified of being irrelevant. Bella was just the predator who smelled their fear and mistook it for adoration. As the plates were cleared, Arthur stood up, signaling the end of the meal for me, though clearly the beginning of the brandy course for them. He walked over to where I was sitting and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. It felt like a threat. "I need a word," he muttered. I followed him into the hallway. Away from the laughter erupting in the dining room, he turned on me, his eyes bulging. "Listen to me closely," he growled. "Zenith is under water. We are bleeding cash. The banks are calling every hour. Bella Sinclair is the only lifeline we have. Her father has deep pockets and he dotes on her. If she wants to play house with Preston, she plays house with Preston. If she wants your closet, she gets your closet. If she wants your husband, frankly, she can borrow him for a while." "Borrow him?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we are calling adultery now? A short-term lease?" "Call it what you want," Arthur spat. "But if you sabotage this deal, if you make her feel unwelcome for 1 second, I will ruin you. I will bury your career. I will make sure you never work in a pharmacy again. You will be back in whatever gutter we pulled you out of." I looked at this man, this titan of industry who was currently trembling with the fear of losing his country club membership. He thought he held all the cards. He thought my silence was submission. "I understand," I said calmly. "You need the money. We need the survival," he corrected. "Now, get out of my sight. Go make yourself useful. Check the inventory for next week. And for God's sake, fix your face." He turned and marched back into the dining room, where Bella was loudly recounting a story about crashing a Ferrari in Monaco. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the cacophony of their entitlement. I could have left. I could have packed my bag and driven away. But that would have been too easy. That would have left them winning. And I was a scientist. I did not leave an experiment unfinished. I walked back into the dining room, but I didn't sit down. I stood at the head of the table, behind Bella's chair. "Before I retire for the evening," I said, my voice projecting clearly over their laughter, "we need to discuss the regimen." The room went quiet. The regimen was the holy grail of the Sterling household. It was the custom cocktail of vitamins, nootropics, and metabolic accelerators I compounded for them every week. It was the secret sauce that kept Arthur's heart pumping despite his steak diet, kept Victoria's energy manic, and kept Preston focused. "What about it?" Preston asked, annoyed. "The launch is in 7 days," I said, adopting my professional tone. "It is the most stressful week of the year. Your cortisol levels will be spiking. Your sleep will be disrupted. Usually, we taper the dose to avoid adrenal fatigue, but given the high stakes and the need for peak performance on the live stream, I need to know how you want to proceed." Victoria looked at me, swirling her wine. She saw me as a servant, a dispenser of goods. She had no idea that she was looking at the architect of her own biology. "Don't be stupid," Victoria sneered. "We don't taper. Not this week. We need to be on fire. We need to look radiant. Double the dose." I paused. I let the silence hang for a second, giving her a chance to retract, to listen to the medical professional she employed. "Victoria, doubling the metabolic activators can be intense. It accelerates everything: digestion, heart rate, sensitivity." "Did I stutter?" Victoria snapped. "I said double it. I want to be vibrating with energy. I want to look 20 years old. And make sure Bella gets a set too. She needs to be sharp for the press." "Me?" Bella wrinkled her nose. "I don't take pills. They taste gross." "These are custom encapsulated," Preston assured her, patting her shoulder. "Priya makes them flavorless. They are magic. Babe, they are the reason I can work 18 hours a day. You'll love them. It's the Zenith secret weapon." Bella shrugged. "Fine, whatever. Just make sure they don't make me bloated." I looked at them, 4 people sitting around a table, demanding to be fed the very thing that would destroy them. They were begging for it. "Very well," I said, lowering my head slightly. Double dosage for everyone, starting tomorrow morning, to ensure peak levels by the broadcast. Good, Arthur grunted. Now go away. You are depressing the atmosphere. Where should I sleep? I asked. One final test of their humanity. The guest room bed is not made up. Oh, just sleep on the sofa in the living room, Victoria said, waving her hand. The guest room is reserved for Bella's stylist who is arriving tomorrow. We can't have you cluttering it up. The sofa, I repeated. It is an Italian leather sofa, Madison added. It cost $12,000. It is probably nicer than whatever bed you grew up in. Good night, I said. I walked out of the dining room, past the foyer, and into the massive, cavernous living room. I didn't go to the sofa. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark grounds of the estate. Upstairs, in the master bedroom that was no longer mine. I could hear music starting. I heard Preston's laughter, loud and uninhibited. I heard Bella's high-pitched giggle. I imagined them in my bed, amidst the neon clothes, planning their future with Bella's father's money. I did not cry. Crying releases oxytocin and endorphins. It is a soothing mechanism. I did not want to be soothed. I wanted to remain sharp. I sat down on the $12,000 sofa and pulled a small notebook from my pocket. I began to write. I wasn't writing a diary entry. I was writing a formula. They wanted a double dose. They wanted to accelerate their metabolism. They wanted to cleanse their systems for the new era of Zenith. I thought about the jar of industrial-strength laxatives sitting in the locked cabinet of my lab at the headquarters, the kind used for rapid bowel evacuation before major abdominal surgery, the kind that turned the human digestive system into a high-pressure fire hose. It was a white powder, odorless, tasteless, and easily soluble in the vitamin casing gel I used. Victoria wanted to be radiant. She wanted to clear out the old to make way for the new. I clicked my pen. Granted, I whispered to the empty room. The calculation was simple. Mass times acceleration equals force. But in this case, the mass was their ego. The acceleration was the laxative, and the force would be absolute. Televised destruction. I lay back on the leather, listening to the ceiling creak above me, and for the first time all day, I smiled. They had taken my bed, my clothes, and my dignity, but they had made the fatal mistake of leaving me with the keys to the medicine cabinet. The headquarters of Zenith Nutrition was a glass monolith in downtown Stamford, a structure designed to look transparent while hiding everything that happened inside. I arrived at 7 in the morning, swiping my security badge with a hand that was steady, despite the tremor in my soul. The air conditioning was set to a brisk 68 degrees, a temperature meant to preserve chemical compounds and keep employees awake. To me, it felt like the temperature of a morgue. I walked straight to my office, a glass-walled enclosure that overlooked the main laboratory floor. This was my kingdom. While the Sterlings played at being business tycoons in their mahogany boardrooms, this was where the actual value of the company was generated. I sat down at my desk and logged into the mainframe. My access was still unrestricted. It was the first mistake they had made that day. I had intended to review the final stability data for the Zenith Glow Serum, but the silence of the building was broken by a familiar voice. It was drifting through the ventilation duct that connected my office to the executive suite next door, Preston's office. He was not supposed to be here. He was supposed to be at the golf course with Bella and his father. I stood up, moving silently to the wall, pressing my ear against the cool plaster near the vent. I do not care about the optics, Gerald. Preston's voice was sharp, agitated. I just want to know if the papers are watertight. A pause. The person on the other end was on speakerphone. It was their family attorney, a man named Gerald, who charged $800 an hour to bury the Sterling's mistakes. The prenuptial agreement is solid. Preston? Gerald's tinny voice floated through. But the timing is delicate. If you serve her now, before the Sinclair deal closes, she could make noise. She could claim duress. She could go to the press. You need her smiling on that stage next week. I can't stand looking at her, Preston hissed. She walks around like a martyr. Bella is getting impatient. She wants the ring on her finger before she starts showing. My heart stopped. I pressed closer to the wall, my breath catching in my throat. Manage Bella, Gerald advised. Tell her it is just for one more week. Once the launch is over and the Sinclair money hits the wire. We file. We lock Priya out of the building, cancel her cards, and serve her with the eviction notice simultaneously. She walks away with what she came in with, which, if I recall, was a student loan debt and a used Honda. And her intellectual property? Preston asked. The formulas? The contract she signed 5 years ago assigns all inventions to Zenith, Gerald said. She owns nothing, not the vitamins, not the serum, not even the name Zenith Glow. It is all ours. Or rather, it is all Bella's now. Perfect, Preston said. I will endure it for 7 more days, but the second that live stream ends, I want her gone. I want her erased. Gerald. I backed away from the wall, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I sank into my office chair, the leather creaking softly. The cruelty was breathtaking in its efficiency. They weren't just leaving me. They were harvesting me. They were waiting until they had extracted the last drop of my utility before discarding the husk. Before she starts showing, the phrase echoed in my mind. I turned to my computer. I needed confirmation. I bypassed the standard employee servers and accessed Preston's personal cloud drive. I knew his password. It was his own birthday. He was a simple man with simple narcissism. I navigated through folders labeled golf, investments, and tax shelters. Then I found a new folder, created 3 months ago. It was labeled Future. I opened it. The first file was a digital scan of an ultrasound. The date was from 2 weeks ago. The patient name was Bella Sinclair. Gestational age, 16 weeks, 4 months. I did the math, staring at the grainy black and white image of the fetus curled like a comma. 4 months ago, I had been organizing Preston's surprise birthday party. I had been comforting him when he cried about the stress of the business. I had been his wife. And all that time, he had been sleeping with the daughter of our potential investor, planting his seed in a womb wrapped in designer silk while I worked late in the lab to save his family's legacy. The nausea hit me hard, but I swallowed it down. Rage is a better fuel than grief. I kept clicking. The next document was a draft of a patent application for Zenith Glow. I scrolled down to the section for inventor. My name should have been there. It was my formula. I had spent 2 years balancing the peptides. I had run the clinical trials. I had the blisters on my fingers and the data in my head. Inventor, Bella Sinclair. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound that frightened me. Bella Sinclair, who thought gluten was a type of bacteria, was listed as the sole inventor of a revolutionary bioactive serum. It was a bribe. They were giving her my life's work as a wedding present to secure her father's $50 million. But why did they need the money so badly? I opened the accounting files. I had never looked closely at the books before. My domain was science, not finance. But now, the numbers screamed at me. Zenith Nutrition was a corpse. The empire was a hollow shell. The revenue columns were shrinking month over month. The debt column was a vertical cliff. I saw credit card statements for Victoria totaling $300,000 in 1 month. Hermes throws, vintage wines, spa treatments in Switzerland. I saw Preston's gambling debts, disguised as consulting fees, amounting to nearly $500,000. They were drowning. They had leveraged the house, the factory, even the patent rights. The Sinclair investment wasn't for expansion. It was to prevent immediate foreclosure. They were selling me to save themselves. I sat back, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. The puzzle was complete. The clothes, the insults, the guest room. It wasn't just pettiness. It was a systematic deconstruction of my existence. They needed to strip me of my confidence so I wouldn't fight back when they finally kicked me to the curb. I looked through the glass wall of my office, down into the pristine white laboratory. It was quiet. The stainless steel mixers gleamed. The rows of amber glass bottles sat on the shelves, waiting to be filled. My eyes landed on the tray I had prepared yesterday, the weekly supply for the Sterling family. the regimen, Victoria's anti-aging complex, Arthur's heart health blend, Preston's energy boosters, and now Bella's prenatal vitamins. Disguised as beauty supplements, they trusted me. Despite everything, their arrogance blinded them to a fundamental truth. You do not abuse the person who prepares your food, and you certainly do not declare war on the person who prepares your drugs. I stood up and walked down the spiral staircase to the lab floor. My footsteps echoed on the epoxy resin. I felt like a judge walking toward the gallows. I approached the chemical storage cabinet. It was locked with a biometric scanner. I pressed my thumb against the glass. The light turned green, and the heavy door clicked open. Inside were rows of raw ingredients: vitamin C powder, caffeine anhydrous, collagen hydrolysate, the building blocks of health. But on the bottom shelf, in a red-labeled container, was something else. It was a bulk container of a substance we used for testing the disintegration rate of our capsules under extreme conditions. It was a hyperosmotic laxative agent, a specialized compound used in high-grade colonoscopy preparations. But in its pure, concentrated form, it was tasteless, it was odorless, and it was violent. I picked up the container. It felt heavy in my hand. I looked at the label. Warning: use only under strict medical supervision. Causes rapid and total evacuation of the gastrointestinal tract. Onset of action: 45 to 60 minutes. 45 minutes, the exact duration of the keynote speech and the contract signing ceremony at the launch event. A plan formed in my mind. Not hot and messy like revenge usually is, but cold and precise like a chemical equation. They wanted to be cleansed. They wanted to start a new chapter. They wanted to get rid of the old to make room for the new. Let's help you with that, I whispered. I carried the container over to the compounding station. I put on my gloves. I put on my mask. I was no longer Priya the wife, or Priya the victim. I was Priya the pharmacist. And I was about to dispense the most important prescription of my career. I reached for the batch of capsules labeled Sterling Family. Special blend. I opened the first capsule, the one destined for Victoria. I poured out the expensive, life-prolonging powder I had designed for her. I watched it fall into the waste bin. Then, with a steady hand, I reached into the red container. I took a scoop of the white powder. It looked innocent. It looked exactly like the vitamin mix. I filled the capsule. I snapped it shut. One down. I moved to Preston's supply, then Arthur's, then Bella's. I worked with rhythm and efficiency. I filled enough capsules for 7 days, escalating the dosage slightly each day, culminating in a massive, industrial-strength load for the final day, the day of the live stream. They wanted a show? I would give them a show. They wanted to be the center of attention? The whole world would be watching. I finished the compounding. I polished the capsules so they shone like jewels. I placed them back in their personalized, gold-lettered bottles. Victoria, Preston, Arthur, Bella. I held Bella's bottle in my hand for a moment. She was pregnant. I paused. The Hippocratic oath whispered in the back of my mind. First, do no harm. But then I remembered the ultrasound. I remembered the look on her face when she touched my grandmother's pearls. I remembered Preston's voice saying, I want her erased. The substance was not toxic to a fetus in a single dose. It acted locally in the gut. It would just be extremely uncomfortable. It would simply ensure that her insides turned to water at the exact moment she tried to steal my life. It was not poison. It was justice. I placed the bottle on the tray. I took off my gloves and threw them in the hazardous waste bin. I locked the cabinet. I turned off the lights in the lab, leaving only the safety lights glowing green in the darkness. I walked back up to my office, gathered my purse, and walked out of the building. The sun was shining outside. The birds were singing. It was a beautiful day in Connecticut. I walked to my car, the secret of the bottles burning a hole in my pocket. I was going back to the mansion to play the role of the dutiful, defeated wife for 1 more week. I would serve them their meals, I would iron their clothes, and I would hand them their pills with a smile. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew the time of death for their social standing. It was set for next Tuesday, at 8 o'clock in the evening, Eastern Standard Time, and I had front row seats. The week leading up to the Zenith Glow launch was a masterclass in psychological warfare, and to their credit, the Sterlings were winning the surface battle. I had reduced myself to a shadow, a silhouette of a wife who moved silently through the corridors of the mansion. Absorbing their insults like a sponge, I cooked their meals. I ironed Preston's shirts because he claimed the housekeeper didn't understand the nuance of his starch preference. I even fetched herbal tea for Victoria when her nerves flared up, which usually happened whenever I entered the room. To them, I was broken. I was the defeated ex-wife-to-be, hanging around only because I had nowhere else to go. But beneath the surface of my submission, I was running a covert operation that would have impressed the CIA. My first order of business was surveillance. If I was going to burn this house down, I needed to ensure I wasn't trapped in the flames. I needed leverage, and I needed protection against the inevitable accusations that would follow. On Tuesday, while the family was out having a celebratory lunch at the country club, I went to work. I had purchased 4 high-definition microcameras online, the kind used by private investigators. I installed the first one in the library, tucked discreetly between the spines of the leather-bound encyclopedias that no one in this family had ever opened. This was where Arthur took his business calls. The second went into the dining room chandelier, offering a panoramic view of their gluttony. The third was placed in the living room, behind a decorative vase, and the fourth, I clipped onto my own blouse, disguised as a brooch, a simple onyx pin that recorded audio and video. I needed them to incriminate themselves, and they were remarkably cooperative. On Wednesday evening, I sat in the guest room, wearing headphones, reviewing the footage from the library. Arthur was on the phone, his voice booming. "Don't worry about the FDA," he was saying, swirling a glass of amber liquid. "We have a guy on the inside. The clinical trial data is cooked. Just make sure the packaging looks premium. Bella's face will sell it, not the science." I saved the clip. Evidence of regulatory fraud. Later that same day, I caught Victoria and Preston in the living room. "When do we kick her out?" Victoria asked, examining her manicure. "Tuesday night," Preston replied. "Right after the broadcast. I've already changed the locks on the digital system. Her code won't work after midnight. She'll be on the street." "Make sure she doesn't take the car," Victoria added. "That Mercedes is company property. She can take an Uber." I saved that clip too. Evidence of premeditated malice and constructive eviction, but audio and video were just the icing. The cake was the financial data. I knew the servers at the office were monitored, but the home network was surprisingly porous. Preston, in his arrogance, often left his laptop open on the kitchen island. On Thursday morning, while he was in the shower, I inserted a high-speed flash drive into his port. It took 3 minutes to copy everything. The offshore accounts in the Caymans, the shell companies used to launder the loan money, the emails between Arthur and the consultants, who were actually loan sharks. I had the entire anatomy of their corruption in a piece of metal the size of my thumb. I encrypted the drive, hid it inside the hollow heel of my spare boot, and went back to making their smoothies. The tension in the house escalated as the weekend approached. Bella was becoming increasingly volatile, the pregnancy hormones mixing with her natural entitlement to create a cocktail of pure toxicity. On Friday afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find a pile of debris in the foyer. It was a mountain of leather and canvas. My shoes, my running sneakers, my hiking boots, my sensible work loafers, and even the expensive heels I had bought for our anniversary. They were heaped in a pile, smelling of garbage. Bella was standing there, directing the housekeeper. "Get rid of this junk," she said, holding a handkerchief to her nose. "It smells like poverty. I need this closet space for my shoe collection. My Louboutins cannot breathe in the same room as these things." I stood there, gripping the grocery bags, my knuckles turning white. Those hiking boots had carried me up Mount Rainier. Those loafers had walked me through my doctoral defense. They were the artifacts of my journey, and she was treating them like hazardous waste. Preston walked in, glancing at the pile and then at me. He didn't even blink. "Just let it go, Priya." You can buy new shoes at Walmart or wherever you are going next. I looked at Bella. She was smirking, waiting for me to explode. She wanted the angry black woman. She wanted the scene that would justify their cruelty. I took a deep breath. I channeled the cold, hard calm of the laboratory. You are right, I said, my voice smooth as glass. They are old. Thank you for helping me declutter. Bella. Her smile faltered. She hadn't expected that. Well, she huffed, flipping her hair. Good. Since you are being so cooperative, I have another task for you. My stylist bailed on me for the show. Something about a family emergency. I need someone to help me dress on Tuesday. Someone who knows how to handle couture. You used to sew, didn't you? I did, I said. Great. She clapped her hands. You will be my dresser. You will make sure I look perfect. You will zip me up, fix my train, and hold my water bottle. You are basically the help anyway. Might as well make it official. I looked into her vacuous eyes. I would be honored. Bella, I will take very good care of you. I will take such good care of you. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with a meaning she couldn't parse. Saturday was the day of the final preparation. I went to the kitchen to prepare the weekly pill organizers. This was a ritual the family watched closely, but understood little. To them, I was just filling plastic slots. I laid out the 4 trays. Victoria, Arthur, Preston, Bella. I brought out the bottles of supplements I had compounded in the lab earlier that week. The bottles looked identical to the ones I always used. Same gold labels, same professional font, but inside the capsules, the payload was different. I had calculated the pharmacokinetics with obsession. The industrial laxative I had used, let's call it Compound X, had a predictable onset. In a normal digestive tract, it began to work in 45 to 60 minutes. The launch event timeline was etched in my brain. 7 o'clock, cocktail hour. 7:30, guests take their seats. 7:45, the family takes their Zenith Vitality Boost live on camera backstage. A toast to health. 8 o'clock, the live stream begins. 8:15, the family takes the stage for speeches. 8:30, the contract signing. If they took the pills at 7:45, the chemical reaction would hit critical mass right around 8:30, right when Bella was bending over to sign the papers. I filled the slots for Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday morning with the loading dose. These capsules contained a mild version of the laxative, enough to soften the battlefield, so to speak. It would make them feel slightly off, maybe a bit rumbly, but nothing alarming. It would ensure their systems were primed and sensitive. But for Tuesday evening, the slot labeled PM, I placed the nuclear option. These were the capsules I had packed tight with the pure, concentrated reagent. Victoria walked into the kitchen as I was snapping the lids shut. She peered over my shoulder, smelling of gin and suspicion. "Are you sure you put enough of the metabolic accelerator in there?" she asked, pointing a manicured finger at her tray. "I want to be glowing, Priya. I don't want to look tired." I looked up at her, masking the intense loathing that threatened to spill out of my eyes. "I tripled the dose, Victoria, just for this special occasion. You are going to feel a rush like never before. It will clear out all the toxins. You will be empty." "Good," she sniffed. "And Bella's? She needs to be radiant." "Bella has a special prenatal blend," I lied smoothly. "It enhances the glow without harming the baby. It is very potent." "Fine," she grabbed her tray. "Don't mess this up. It is the only thing you are good for." She marched away, clutching her tray like a treasure chest. I watched her go, a dark satisfaction curling in my gut. She was literally carrying her own destruction in her hands. That night, I sat in the living room, finishing the digital component of my revenge. I had compiled the videos, the audio recordings, and the financial spreadsheets into a single, massive zip file. I composed an email to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the FBI Financial Crimes Division, the FDA Regulatory Affairs Office. Subject: the Sterling Fraud, Zenith Nutrition, Whistleblower Evidence. I attached the file. Then, I set the delivery timer, scheduled for Tuesday, January 27th, 8:45 p.m. 15 minutes after the chaos would begin on stage. By the time they waddled off that platform, their phones would be blowing up with calls from federal agents. I closed my laptop. The house was quiet. I walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Preston and Bella were there, leaning against the counter. Preston had just swallowed his Sunday night pills. Bella was holding hers, looking at it skeptically. "Go on, babe," Preston urged. "It makes you feel amazing, I promise." Bella sighed and popped the capsule into her mouth. Washing it down with alkaline water, she swallowed. I stood in the doorway, unseen in the shadows. I watched the capsule travel down her throat. "Did you take yours?" Preston asked Arthur, who had just shuffled in. Yeah, Arthur grunted, patting his stomach. "Let's hope this works. I feel heavy." "You won't feel heavy for long," I whispered to myself. I watched them for a moment longer. The family that had taken everything from me, my home, my dignity, my clothes, my future, they stood there, vibrant and arrogant, completely unaware that the countdown had already started inside their bodies. I turned and walked back to my sofa bed. I pulled the scratchy blanket up to my chin. For the first time in a week, I slept soundly. I didn't need to dream. My reality was about to become better than any dream. The fuse was lit. All I had to do now was wait for the explosion. Tuesday arrived with the sharp, metallic taste of adrenaline in my mouth. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel had been transformed into a temple of commerce and vanity. Giant LED screens spanned the walls, projecting the Zenith Nutrition logo in looping, hypnotic gold. The air smelled of expensive lilies and the ozone tang of broadcast equipment. It was a stage set for a coronation, but I knew it was actually a slaughterhouse. I was not permitted to enter through the front doors, while the guests, captains of industry, Instagram influencers, and potential investors, walked the red carpet. I was ushered in through the service entrance near the loading dock. I was not wearing the bespoke white suit I had purchased for this occasion. Instead, I was wearing a black polo shirt 2 sizes too big and polyester trousers that rustled when I walked. I was part of the logistics team. My badge did not say Director of Research and Development. It said Support Staff. The humiliation was designed to be total. Victoria wanted me to feel the texture of my new station in life before she finalized my exile. I walked through the labyrinth of backstage corridors. Carrying a silver tray, my hands were steady, anchored by the weight of 4 small crystal glasses and 4 gold-capped bottles. The green room was a frenzy of activity. Makeup artists were hovering like hummingbirds, dabbing powder on foreheads and contouring cheekbones. Stylists were steaming fabrics. In the center of the storm sat the Sterling family, the eye of the hurricane. Victoria was snapping at a terrified production assistant about the humidity levels. Arthur was pacing, rehearsing his lines about integrity and legacy. Preston was checking his teeth in a lighted mirror. And then there was Bella. She was standing on a podium, being sewn into her dress. It was a cream-colored architectural marvel of silk and boning, designed to cinch her waist to an impossible diameter and push her bust up to her chin. It was tight, unforgivingly tight. It was a dress designed for a mannequin, not a living, breathing woman, and certainly not a pregnant one. The corsetry was doing a heroic job of flattening the 4-month bump, compressing her midsection with hydraulic force. I watched her, and a dark, clinical thought crossed my mind. Compression equals pressure. Pressure equals accelerated expulsion. "You!" Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. She spotted me in the mirror. "You are late. The lighting check is in 10 minutes, and my skin feels dry. Where is the hydration mist?" I stepped forward, bowing my head slightly. "I have it right here. Victoria, along with the pre-show regimen." "About time," she hissed. She turned to the makeup artist, a young woman with pink hair. "Look at her. She used to think she was one of us. Now look." It is tragic, really. Some people just don't have the stamina for this level of success. The makeup artist glanced at me with pity. I didn't blink. I set the tray down on the vanity table. Get the water, Victoria commanded, and make sure it is room temperature. If it is too cold, it shocks the vocal cords. I poured the water. It was exactly 68 degrees. I handed her the glass. This glass is smudged, she shrieked. Throwing it back onto the tray, water sloshed over the rim, soaking the paper napkins. Can you do nothing right? Even as a servant, you are incompetent. Wipe it. Now. There was no smudge. It was pristine crystal, but I took the napkin and wiped the glass. I apologize. Victoria. The lights must have caught a reflection. Just give me the pills, she snapped. I need to get this over with. This was the moment. The point of no return. I picked up the first bottle. Victoria. This is the booster, I said, my voice projecting calm authority. It is the double dose you asked for. It contains the high-concentration metabolic activators to ensure your skin reflects the stage lights perfectly. You will feel a surge of warmth in about 45 minutes. That is the toxins leaving your cells. Good, she said, snatching the 2 large capsules from my palm. She tossed them into her mouth and swallowed them with a gulp of water. I watched her throat muscles work. Down the hatch, I moved to Arthur. He was sweating already. Arthur, I said, this blend is for your heart rate and focus. It will keep you sharp during the Q&A session. No brain fog. He grunted, grabbing the pills. Better work. Priya, if I stumble on my words, I'm docking your severance pay. Oh wait, you aren't getting any. He laughed at his own joke and swallowed the pills. Preston was next. He stood up, smoothing his tuxedo jacket. He looked handsome. I had to admit, it was the face I had fallen in love with, masking the soul of a viper. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into the corner of the room, away from the stylists. His grip was bruising. Listen to me, he whispered, his breath smelling of mint and ambition. You see how this works? We are the stars. You are the help. Don't get comfortable back here. As soon as the camera's cut, you are leaving. I have the papers in my jacket pocket. You will sign them in the car, and then you will get out. If you make a scene, if you try to talk to the press, I will release the photos of you stealing company property. I have had security doctor the footage. You will be unemployable. I understand. Preston, I said, looking into his eyes. I just want you to have a successful night. I want you to get everything you deserve. I always get what I deserve, he said arrogantly. Then take your vitamins, I said, opening his hand and placing the capsules in his palm. You need energy. Bella is going to be demanding tonight. He smirked and swallowed them dry. Finally, I approached Bella. She was still unable to move freely in the dress. She looked like a beautiful, expensive statue. Water, she demanded, snapping her fingers. I brought the glass to her lips because she couldn't lift her arms high enough without risking a seam rupture. Here are your vitamins, Bella, I said softly, for the baby and for the glow. You want to look radiant when you sign the contract. She looked at the pills. These are huge. They are potent, I assured her. Just swallow them. For the future of Zenith. She rolled her eyes, opened her mouth, and let me drop the capsules onto her tongue. She gulped the water. Ugh, she grimaced. Whatever. Fix my train. It is bunched up. I knelt down. I arranged the silk train of her dress, smoothing the fabric. As I was down there, I looked at the hidden zipper running up her spine. It was straining against the fabric. The tension was immense. The structural integrity of that dress was already at its limit. There, I said, standing up. You are perfect. I know, she said. The stage manager burst into the room, wearing a headset. 5 minutes to red carpet. Places, everyone. The Sterling family. You are up. The energy in the room shifted. It was showtime. Victoria checked her reflection one last time. Arthur adjusted his tie. Preston offered his arm to Bella. They swept out of the room like a royal procession, leaving a wake of perfume and entitlement. They didn't look back at me. Why would they? One does not look back at the furniture. I waited until the door clicked shut. Then, I moved. I locked the green room door from the inside. The air was still thick with their presence. but I ignored it. I walked to the staff locker in the corner where I had stashed my gear earlier that morning. I stripped off the oversized polo shirt and the polyester trousers. I kicked off the cheap rubber-soled shoes. From the locker, I pulled out a garment bag. I unzipped it. Inside was my suit. It was not a Zenith corporate suit. It was a white tuxedo suit, sharp, tailored, and immaculate. It was the color of a blank slate, the color of purification. I put it on. The silk lining felt cool against my skin. I buttoned the jacket. I put on my own heels, a pair I had kept hidden in my car trunk. Safe from Bella's purge, I pulled my hair back into a severe, high bun. I looked in the mirror. The servant was gone. The victim was gone. The woman staring back at me was the CEO of her own destiny. I checked my watch. 7:55. They had taken the pills 10 minutes ago. The capsule shells were made of gelatin. They would dissolve in the stomach within 15 minutes. Then, the powder would mix with the gastric acids. The countdown had begun. I unlocked the door and slipped out into the hallway. I didn't go back to the service entrance. I walked toward the stage wings. My pass allowed me all access for logistics, and I intended to use it. I found a spot in the shadows of the stage left wing, hidden behind a heavy velvet curtain, but with a clear line of sight to the stage and the giant monitors. On the screen, I could see them on the red carpet outside. They were beaming. A reporter thrust a microphone at Victoria. "Mrs. Sterling, you look ageless. What is your secret?" Victoria laughed, a practiced, tinkling sound. "Oh, it is simply clean living and Zenith nutrition. We believe that what you put inside your body reflects on the outside." I stifled a laugh. "Oh, Victoria, you have no idea how true that is." Arthur was bragging to a reporter from CNBC. "We are projecting triple-digit growth. The Sinclair partnership is just the beginning. We are unstoppable." Preston and Bella were posing for photos. Preston's hand was resting possessively on Bella's waist, or rather, on the corset that was squeezing her internal organs. Bella was smiling, but I could see a tiny flicker of discomfort in her eyes. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Tick-tock. They moved inside the ballroom. The applause was thunderous. The music swelled. A dramatic orchestral piece commissioned just for this moment. The announcer's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the first family of wellness, the Sterlings." They walked onto the stage. The lights were blindingly bright. The heat from the spots would be intense. Heat accelerates metabolic processes. It increases blood flow to the gut. I checked my watch again. 8:15. 30 minutes since ingestion. The capsules were definitely dissolved now. The concentrated powder was currently mingling with the champagne they had sipped in the green room and the canapes they had eaten earlier. The osmotic pressure in their intestines was beginning to build. Water was being drawn from their bloodstreams into their bowels at a catastrophic rate. Victoria took the podium. She looked magnificent in the harsh light, her skin glowing, but I noticed a sheen of sweat on her upper lip that wasn't there before. She adjusted the microphone, her hand trembling slightly. "Welcome," she said, her voice booming. "Welcome to the future." She paused. Taking a breath, it was a shallow breath. She placed a hand on her stomach, a subtle, involuntary movement. I leaned against a road case. Crossing my arms, I had a front-row seat to the end of the world. Bella was standing next to Preston, holding her bouquet of flowers. She looked rigid. Her smile was frozen. She whispered something to Preston. He ignored her, waving to the crowd. I saw Bella clench her jaw. I saw the muscles in her neck tighten. 40 minutes since ingestion. The rumble phase was beginning, that deep, subterranean warning that every human being recognizes instinctively, the signal that says, "Find a bathroom, now." But they couldn't leave. They were live. There were 6 cameras pointed at them. They were the stars. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the app that controlled the visual presentation on the giant screen behind them. I had the override codes. I wasn't just going to watch them fall. I was going to provide the commentary. But not yet. Let them sweat first. Victoria was speaking, but her cadence was rushing. She was talking faster, skipping pauses. She wanted to get off that stage. "We have worked hard," she stammered. "To bring you purity." She winced. It was quick, but I saw it. A sharp spasm of pain. Arthur was shifting his weight violently. He looked like he was doing a subtle dance. His face was turning from ruddy to a pale, clammy gray. I saw Preston reach for the water glass on the podium. His hand shook so hard, water splashed onto his cuff. And Bella, poor, wicked Bella. She looked terrified. The pressure in her abdomen, fighting against the constriction of the corset, must have been excruciating. She looked like a bottle of champagne that had been shaken for an hour and was about to be uncorked. I looked at my watch. 8:25. 5 minutes until the contract signing, 5 minutes until the peak effect. The train was leaving the station, the brakes had been cut, and I was the conductor. "Enjoy the ride," I whispered into the darkness. The master of ceremonies was a man with teeth so white they looked like ceramic tiles and a voice that sounded like it had been dipped in honey. He stood at the center of the stage, bathed in a spotlight that cost more per hour to run than most people earned in a month, working the crowd into a frenzy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, his voice reverberating through the massive speaker system. "Tonight, we do not just celebrate a product, we celebrate a philosophy. We celebrate the pinnacle of human evolution. Please, direct your attention to the stage for the family that embodies purity, vitality, and perfect health. The Sterling family!" The applause was thunderous. It was a wave of sound that crashed against the stage, a physical force of adoration. From my vantage point in the wings, hidden by the heavy velvet curtain, I watched the four of them bask in it. They looked like gods. Victoria was shimmering in her gold gown. Arthur stood like a titan of industry in his tuxedo, and Preston and Bella were the picture of youthful, fertile success. But as a scientist, I knew that even gods are subject to the laws of chemistry, and right now, chemistry was about to stage a coup. Victoria approached the podium first. She adjusted the microphone, flashing a smile that was practiced to perfection. "Thank you," she purred, her voice steady. "Thank you all. When we founded Zenith Nutrition 30 years ago, we had a simple mission: to cleanse the body, to purify the soul, to eliminate the toxins that drag us down." She paused for effect. It was a good pause, but then I saw it. A subtle twitch in her left eye. It was microscopic, visible perhaps only to me and the high-definition camera zooming in on her face. Her hand, which was resting on the podium, tightened. Her knuckles turned the color of bleached bone. "We believe," she continued. But her tempo had shifted. It was slightly faster, a little more urgent. "We believe that true beauty comes from within." As she said the word within, a bead of sweat broke free from her hairline. It rolled down her temple, cutting a track through her foundation like a river carving through a canyon. It was 80 degrees under those stage lights, but that was not heat sweat. That was cold sweat. That was the clammy, distinct perspiration of the autonomic nervous system crying out in alarm. Victoria swallowed hard. I could see the muscles in her neck contract. She shifted her weight from her left foot to her right, a subtle dance of discomfort. The industrial-strength laxative cocktail I had prepared, a blend designed to clear a blockade in a rhinoceros, was beginning to knock on the door. Down in the front row of the VIP section, seated in a plush velvet chair just below the stage, Preston was having his own internal dialogue. He was sitting with his legs crossed, projecting an air of relaxed dominance, but then he uncrossed them. Quickly, he gripped the armrests of his chair with a force that threatened to crush the wood. His eyes, usually scanning the crowd for approval, were now fixed on a middle distance, glazed over with a look of intense concentration. It was the look of a man trying to solve a complex calculus equation in his head, except the equation was sphincter tension times time equals disaster. He shifted again, sliding his hips forward, then backward, trying to find a position that didn't put pressure on his lower abdomen. There was no such position. The laws of physics were against him. Standing next to him, waiting for her cue to join Victoria on stage, was Bella. If the others were in discomfort, Bella was in a torture chamber. That custom-made corset, cinched tight enough to displace her liver, was now acting as a pressure cooker. The gas building up in her intestines had nowhere to go. It was trapped between her spine and the rigid boning of the dress. I saw her hand flutter to her stomach, then quickly pull away as if she remembered the cameras were watching. She looked pale. The healthy glow we had promised was rapidly turning into a sickly greenish hue, like old fluorescent lighting. She was taking shallow, rapid breaths, her chest heaving against the silk. But the star of this opening act was undoubtedly Arthur Sterling. Arthur was standing just behind Victoria, waiting for his turn to speak about financial growth. He was wearing a lavalier microphone clipped to his tie, positioned perfectly over his sternum. The room went quiet as Victoria paused to take a sip of water, her hand shaking so badly the ice cubes clinked like wind chimes. And in that silence, it happened. It wasn't a small sound. It wasn't the polite, quiet rumble of hunger. It was a deep, tectonic shifting of plates. It sounded like a drain unclogging in a sewer system. It was a wet, angry, a prolonged growl that started low and ended in a high-pitched squeak. And because Arthur's microphone was live, and the sound system was state-of-the-art, that sound was amplified to 100 decibels. It blasted out of the speakers, rolling over the audience like a sonic boom. The front row flinched. Arthur's eyes went wide. He grabbed his stomach instinctively, looking down at his own torso as if it had betrayed him. The audience began to murmur. I saw people in the second row looking at each other, confused. Was that a sound effect? Was it part of the show? A thunderclap to signify the power of Zenith? Victoria froze mid-sip. She stared at Arthur with a mix of horror and fury. "Arthur," she hissed, away from her mic but audible to those close by. "Control yourself." "I didn't do it," Arthur whispered back, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "It's the cramps." Back at the podium, Victoria tried to recover. She was a professional. After all, she forced a smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. "As I was saying," she stammered, "the body tells us what it needs. It speaks to us." Another sound from Arthur. This one was wetter, more distinct. It sounded like a boot being pulled out of deep mud. The murmurs in the audience grew louder. Someone in the back giggled. I stood in the wings, leaning against a crate, and lifted my glass of water to my lips. The water was cool and crisp. I took a slow, deliberate sip, savoring the hydration. I felt fantastic. My digestion was perfect. My conscience was clear. On stage, the panic was setting in. It was a silent, desperate panic communicated through widened eyes and clenched jaws. They knew. They all knew. It hit them simultaneously. The cramping, the urgency, the undeniable biological reality that something was terribly, horribly wrong. Victoria looked down at Preston. Preston looked up at Victoria. Their eyes locked. In that exchange, 1,000 words were spoken. My stomach is killing me. Mine too. We have to stop. We can't stop. We are live. The producer, oblivious to the medical emergency unfolding, spoke into their earpieces. "Great energy. Keep it going. Victoria, wrap it up and introduce Bella. We are 10 seconds behind schedule." Victoria nodded jerkily. She gripped the podium so hard I thought she might rip it out of the floor. She needed it for stability. Her legs were beginning to tremble. The muscles in her thighs were locked in a spasm of control. "And now," Victoria said, her voice strained, lacking all its usual breath support because she didn't dare relax her diaphragm. "To sign the historic agreement, the future of our company, my daughter-in-law to be Bella Sinclair." The music swelled. It was a triumphant, upbeat track. Bella didn't move. She stood frozen next to Preston. She looked terrified to take a step. She knew. With the instinct of a trapped animal, that movement was dangerous. Walking required engaging the core muscles. Engaging the core muscles meant relaxing the pelvic floor. And relaxing the pelvic floor right now was not an option. Bella, Preston hissed through his teeth, smiling violently at the camera. Get up there. I can't, Bella whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Preston, my stomach, it feels like knives. I need to go to the bathroom, now. You can't go to the bathroom, Preston snapped, his own face slick with sweat as he fought his own battle. We are on live television. Just hold it. Walk up the stairs. Sign the paper. Smile. I can't walk, she whimpered. If I move, I'm going to walk. Preston grabbed her elbow and hoisted her up. The motion clearly caused her agony. She let out a small gasp that was caught by the boom mic. She hobbled toward the stairs leading to the stage. She walked like a marionette with tangled strings, stiff, jerky, knees pressed together. The audience applauded, thinking she was perhaps overcome with emotion. She looks overcome, a woman in the front row whispered to her husband. She looks like she's holding a coin between her knees, the husband replied. As Bella ascended the 3 steps to the stage, Arthur let out another sound. This one was a high-pitched whine, like a deflating balloon. He clamped a hand over his mouth, but the sound wasn't coming from there. Victoria, standing at the podium, looked like she was about to faint. The toxins were indeed leaving her cells, just as I had promised. But they were gathering for a mass exodus that she could not delay much longer. She looked desperately toward the wings. She was looking for water. She was looking for a bucket. She was looking for salvation. Instead, she found me. I stepped out from behind the velvet curtain, just enough so that only she could see me. I was bathed in the dim blue light of the backstage area. I was wearing my white suit, glowing like an avenging angel. I stood tall, my posture relaxed, a stark contrast to their rigid agony. Victoria's eyes locked onto mine. She saw the calm on my face. She saw the faint, terrifying smile playing on my lips. And then she looked at the glass of water in my hand. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The pills, the special blend, the double dose she had demanded. Her eyes went wide, bulging with a mixture of rage and sudden, absolute comprehension. She looked at me, then down at her stomach, then back at me. She mouthed the word, you. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. I simply raised my glass of water in a silent toast. Cheers, Victoria. To your health. I took another sip, maintaining eye contact. Victoria let out a sound that was half groan, half sob. The anger in her eyes was replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. She knew, in that moment, that I held the remote control to her dignity, and I had just pressed the detonate button. Preston, she croaked, her voice breaking on the microphone. Preston was now on stage, guiding a terrified Bella toward the desk where the contracts lay. He heard his mother's tone. He looked up. What? He snapped, forgetting the cameras. It's the pills, Victoria gasped, clutching her midsection. The pills she poisoned us. Preston froze. He looked at his mother. Then he looked at the wings. He saw me. I gave him a small wave, a polite, goodbye sort of wave. The blood drained from Preston's face. He felt the rumble in his own gut intensify, shifting from a threat to a promise. He looked at Bella, who was now bent over the desk, clutching a pen but unable to write because she was using both hands to brace herself against the table. Sign it, Preston yelled, panic taking over. Sign it now. I can't, Bella wailed. It's coming. What is coming? Arthur bellowed, doubling over as a massive cramp seized him. The audience was now dead silent. The music had stopped. The only sounds in the massive ballroom were the amplified, wet gurgles of 4 digestive systems in full revolt. It was the silence before the storm. The dam was cracking. The water was trickling through. And I stood there, the architect of the flood, watching the cracks widen. 3, I whispered to myself, counting down. 2, 1. The contract signing ceremony was intended to be the visual climax of the evening. A sleek, lucite desk had been positioned center stage. bathed in a halo of white light that was supposed to represent transparency and purity. On the desk lay the partnership agreement, bound in leather, and a gold fountain pen that Arthur Sterling had reportedly spent $5,000 on. It was a tableau of corporate triumph. Preston guided Bella toward this altar of capitalism. His grip on her arm was tight, white-knuckled, not out of affection, but out of a desperate need to keep her upright. Bella was moving with the stiff, shuffling gait of a penguin. Her face was a mask of sheer, glistening panic. The sweat had broken through her heavy stage makeup, creating rivulets that ran down her neck and pooled in the clavicle hollows I had once admired for their elegance. I watched from the wings, my heart rate steady at 70 beats per minute. I was witnessing a biological inevitability. The law of mass action states that the rate of a chemical reaction is directly proportional to the product of the activities or concentrations of the reactants. In this case, the reactants were stress, compression, and a massive dose of osmotic laxatives. The product would be catastrophe. "Just sign it," Preston muttered. His voice picked up by the sensitive ambient microphones that the sound engineers had forgotten to cut. "Bend down and sign the damn thing." Bella looked at the chair. It was low. Sitting down would require bending at the waist. Bending at the waist would compress the abdomen. "I can't sit," she whispered, her voice trembling with tears. "If I sit, I will explode." "Then stand and lean," Preston hissed, flashing a dazzling, terrifying smile at the camera crane swooping overhead. "Just lean over." Bella nodded, a jerky, spasmodic motion. She approached the table. She placed one hand on the cool, lucite surface to brace herself. She held the pen in the other. She took a breath, held it, and began to lean forward. The angle of inclination was perhaps 30 degrees. It was enough. The physics of the situation took over. As her torso lowered, the corset dug into her distended intestines like a piston, the pressure inside her colon, already building to volcanic levels, found the path of least resistance. It started with a sound. It was not an ambiguous rumble this time. It was a sharp, tearing noise, like canvas ripping, followed immediately by a wet, thunderous explosion that echoed through the silent ballroom with the clarity of a gunshot. The sound was so loud, so violent, that the feedback loop on the speakers shrieked in protest. The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath from 500 of New York's elite. Bella froze. Her eyes went wide, staring at nothing. Ideally, this would have been the end of it, a mortifying burst of gas. But gravity is a cruel mistress. A dark stain began to blossom on the back of her custom-made, cream-colored silk dress. It started small, right at the base of her spine. And then, with horrifying speed, it expanded. It spread downward like an ink spill on blotting paper, turning the pristine, pearl-colored fabric into a heavy, sodden brown. "Oh my God!" someone in the front row screamed. Bella let out a wail, a primal sound of pure misery. "No, no!" She tried to straighten up, but the muscular spasm was too intense. Her knees gave way. She collapsed onto the stage, not gracefully, but in a heap. As she hit the floor, the impact forced another wave of evacuation. The liquid filth pooled around her, soaking into the expensive red carpet, ruining the hem of the $20,000 dress, and creating a slippery, noxious radius of destruction around the heiress. Preston, fueled by adrenaline and the desperate delusion that he could still salvage the optical situation, lunged forward to catch her. "Bella!" he shouted, grabbing her shoulders, but as he bent over, the sudden movement compressed his own stomach. The zenith vitality blend I had given him, rich in gastric irritants, revolted. He didn't just feel sick, he purged. Preston Sterling, the face of the company, the golden boy, opened his mouth to speak, but instead, a torrent of vomit erupted from him. It projected violently, splashing over the lucite desk, coating the leather-bound contract, and splattering onto Bella's face as she lay in her own waste. The smell hit the audience a second later. It was a wall of stench, a mixture of sulfur, fermented biological waste, and acrid bile. It was the smell of death, of a slaughterhouse in high summer. The front row recoiled physically. People jumped out of their seats, covering their noses with silk handkerchiefs and clutch purses. Victoria, standing at the podium 10 feet away, watched her dynasty disintegrate in real time. Her face was a mask of horror. She saw the cameras. She saw the red tally lights blinking. She knew that millions of people were watching her son vomit on her future daughter-in-law, while the latter lay in a pool of excrement. She did the only thing a mother and a narcissist could do. She tried to block the view. "Cut the feed!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "Cut the cameras!" She ran toward them, her gold gown shimmering. She intended to throw herself in front of the lens, to create a human shield, but she forgot about the physics of friction, or rather, the lack thereof. The stage was now coated in slick fluids. Victoria was wearing 5-inch stilettos, her right heel planted squarely in the puddle that had spread from Bella's dress. Her foot slid out from under her with cartoonish speed. Victoria flailed, her arms windmilling in the air, grasping for something to hold on to. She grabbed the edge of the lucite desk, but her weight was too much. The desk tipped. She went down hard. She landed flat on her back, right in the center of the mess. The impact knocked the wind out of her. She lay there, gasping like a fish on a dock, her gold dress acting as a sponge for the horrific cocktail of fluids surrounding her. Her meticulously coiffed silver hair was instantly matted with the filth. Arthur Sterling, the patriarch, the man who had threatened to bury me, saw this. He saw his wife, his son, and his investor lying in a heap of human waste. He didn't run to help them. He ran for the exit. "Get me out of here," he bellowed, clutching his own stomach as another cramp nearly doubled him over. He scrambled toward the stage stairs, his eyes bulging with panic, but his coordination was gone. The toxins were firing through his nervous system, causing tremors. He missed the first step. He tumbled. It wasn't a tragic fall. It was a pathetic one. He rolled down the 4 steps, limbs flailing, and landed face first at the feet of the horrified VIP guests in the front row. His tuxedo pants, I noted with clinical satisfaction, were also beginning to darken at the seat. The ballroom was in chaos. People were screaming. Some were laughing. That hysterical, shocked laughter that comes when the brain cannot process what it is seeing. The cameramen didn't cut the feed. They were paralyzed. Or perhaps, deep down, they were enjoying it. The camera operators kept rolling, zooming in on the carnage. The giant LED screens behind the stage, which were meant to show the contract signing, now displayed a 40-foot-tall image of Preston wiping vomit from his mouth while Victoria struggled to sit up in a puddle of diarrhea. It was the most honest thing Zenith Nutrition had ever broadcast. The security team, burly men in black suits, rushed from the sides of the room. They bounded up the stairs, ready to extract the VIPs. But 5 feet away from the epicenter, they stopped. They literally hit a wall of smell. One guard gagged, covering his mouth. Another turned his head away, eyes watering. They hesitated. No amount of hourly wage was enough to make a man dive into that biohazard zone. "Help us!" Victoria shrieked from the floor, her voice shrill and broken. "Don't just stand there. We are dying." They weren't dying. They were just living with the consequences of their own choices. The live stream chat, which was being projected on a smaller side screen, was moving so fast it was a blur. Is happening? Is this a performance art piece? Did they just? Zenith Detox is real LOL. I'm gonna throw up. I watched the comments scroll by. The brand wasn't just dead. It was being cremated, buried, and danced upon. I placed my empty water glass on a road case. I smoothed the lapels of my white suit. I checked my reflection in the back of a monitor. Not a hair was out of place. I looked pristine. I looked clinical. I looked like the cure. It was time. I walked out from the wings. I didn't run. I didn't rush. I walked with the slow, deliberate cadence of a predator entering a clearing where the prey is already wounded. The click of my heels was lost in the commotion. but my presence was not. I was a beacon of white in a sea of brown and red. I walked past the hesitation of the security guards. I held my breath, not out of fear, but out of necessity. The smell was indeed impressive. I stepped onto the stage, navigating the dry patches of carpet with the precision of a hopscotch player. I approached the disaster zone. Preston, who was on his hands and knees, looked up. His eyes were red, watery, and filled with confusion. He saw the white suit. He saw the face of the wife he had discarded. "Priya," he croaked, vomit dripping from his chin. "Help me. Get a towel." Victoria, struggling to push herself up, slipped again and let out a sob. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Priya, does something. Call a doctor." Bella was just crying, a low, keening sound, curled into a fetal ball, trying to hide her shame in the folds of her ruined dress. I stopped 3 feet away from them. I looked down. It was a tableau that belonged in a Renaissance painting titled "The Fall of the Damned." I didn't reach for a towel. I didn't reach for a hand. I reached for the microphone stand that Victoria had knocked over. I picked it up. It was heavy, chrome, and cold. I tapped the head of the mic. Thump, thump. The sound echoed through the ballroom, cutting through the murmurs and the screams. The audience went silent. They looked at the woman in white standing over the fallen family. The camera operators, sensing a new narrative, swung their lenses toward me. My face filled the giant screens, towering over the image of the Sterlings groveling in the filth. I looked directly into the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall, staring into the souls of the millions of people watching on their phones and laptops. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice calm, clear, and devoid of pity. "I apologize for the interruption." I looked down at Preston. He was staring up at me, and for the first time, he realized that this wasn't an accident. He saw the lack of surprise on my face. "What you are witnessing," I continued, gesturing to the human wreckage at my feet with an elegant sweep of my hand, "is not a medical emergency. It is a transparency report." I paused, letting the words sink in. "For years, the Sterling family has sold you a lie wrapped in gold packaging. They promised you that their products would cleanse you. They promised that they would strip away the toxins and leave only purity." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Well," I said, "it seems the product works. Because right now, on this stage, you are seeing the toxins leaving the body. You are seeing the greed, the lies, and the rot being expelled in real time." Victoria gasped. "You." "Hush, Victoria," I said, my voice snapping like a whip. "You have had the floor for 30 years. It is my turn now." I turned back to the audience. "They threw out my clothes because they said I didn't fit their image," I said, my voice dropping to a conversational, intimate volume. "They said I was too plain, too boring, too clean." I looked at my white suit, not a speck of dirt on it. "I think the image has been corrected," I said. I looked at the camera again. "My name is Priya Lancaster. I am the scientist who created the formulas these people took credit for. And tonight, I am resigning." I reached into the pocket of my jacket and pulled out a small, encrypted USB drive, a copy of the one I had sent to the FBI. I held it up to the light. "But before I go," I said, "I have one last delivery to make." The silence in the room was absolute. Even Arthur, lying at the bottom of the stairs, had stopped groaning to listen. I dropped the USB drive onto the chest of Preston Sterling, right where his heart would be if he had one. "Clean up on aisle 5, I said. I didn't drop the mic. That would be cliché. I placed it gently back on the stand, towering over them like a tombstone. Then, I turned around. I stood in the center of the storm, a monolith of white silk amidst a sea of biological ruin. The smell was atrocious, a pungent mix of sulfur and humiliation, but I did not flinch. In fact, I inhaled deeply. To me, it did not smell like excrement. It smelled like consequences. The audience was frozen, caught in that liminal space between horror and fascination. They were witnessing the social execution of a dynasty, and like spectators at a gladiator match, they could not look away. I raised the microphone again. My voice was not shrill. It was not angry. It was the cool, modulated tone of a lead scientist presenting irrefutable data at a conference. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling, "what you are seeing before you is not a malfunction. It is a revelation. For years, the Sterling family has sold you the concept of detox. They promised that if you bought their pills, if you drank their shakes, you would purge yourself of impurities." I looked down at Victoria, who was wiping sludge from her eyes with a shaking hand. "Well," I continued, "it seems the product works better than advertised, because these people are finally showing you their true selves. This is not just a bowel movement. This is the physical manifestation of a rotten soul. This is what happens when you ingest lies for 30 years. Eventually, the system rejects them." Preston tried to stand up. He slipped on the slick stage, his knees splashing into the mess. "Shut up," he gurgled, his voice weak and pathetic. "Someone cut the mic." "No one is cutting the mic, Preston," I said, "because I control the soundboard now, and I control the video feed." I pulled my phone from my pocket. With a single tap on the screen, I executed the command I had programmed days ago. Behind me, the giant LED screens flashed. The image of the vomiting family disappeared. In its place, a spreadsheet appeared. It was massive, projected 40 feet high. "This," I said, pointing to the screen without turning around, "is the current financial state of Zenith Nutrition. As you can see, the company is not thriving, as Arthur told you. It is bankrupt. They are $28 million in debt. They have leveraged this company, this building, and even their private homes to fund a lifestyle they cannot afford." The crowd gasped. I saw investors in the front row pulling out their phones, frantically calling their brokers. I tapped my phone again. The screen changed. It was now a series of emails between Preston and his father. "And here," I narrated, "is the correspondence regarding the new formula. You will notice the date stamps. They plan to fire me the moment the Sinclair check cleared. They plan to steal my work, rebrand it, and leave me destitute." "Liar," Victoria shrieked from the floor. "She is a liar." "Am I?" I asked. "Let's go to the videotape." I swiped left on my phone. The video on the giant screen changed. It was high-definition footage, taken from the camera I had hidden in the master bedroom closet. The audio was crystal clear. Victoria's face filled the screen, looking sneering and cruel. "Your clothes are too outdated and gloomy. We donated them. This is Bella's closet." The audience watched in stunned silence as Victoria admitted to stealing my property. Then, the clip cut to the library. Arthur's voice boomed out. "If she sabotages this deal, I will ruin her. I will bury her career." Then, the final clip, Preston and his lawyer. "I can't stand looking at her. I want her erased. Gerald." The silence in the ballroom was heavy, suffocating. The mask was not just slipped. It was shattered. The Sterlings weren't just sick. They were monsters. I looked down at Bella. She was still on the floor, weeping, her expensive dress ruined, her dignity gone. She looked up at me, her mascara running in black streaks down her face. "And you," I said softly. My voice projected to millions. "Bella Sinclair." I gestured to her with an open hand. "You wanted my life so badly," I said. "You wanted my husband. You wanted my bedroom. You even wanted my closet space because you thought my clothes weren't good enough for you." I paused, looking at the brown stains spreading across her backside. "Well, look at you now," I said. "You are wearing the consequences of your ambition. I hope you like the new outfit. Bella, it is one of a kind." "It smells exactly like the Sterling reputation," Bella wailed, burying her face in her hands. Preston managed to push himself up to a kneeling position. He looked like a broken man. "You are crazy," he shouted, though it sounded more like a plea. "You destroyed us. You violated the NDA. You can't do this. We own you. We own the formulas. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, bright and free. Oh, Preston, I said, shaking my head. You really should have read the fine print of my employment contract, or checked the patent registry more carefully. I tapped my phone one last time. A document appeared on the screen. It was a United States Patent and Trademark Office registration certificate. You see, I addressed the crowd. When I developed the Zenith Glow formula and the Vitality Complex, I didn't do it as an employee of Zenith. I did it on my own time, in my own lab, before I signed your predatory contract, and I registered every single patent under my maiden name. The name Priya Lancaster glowed on the screen in giant letters. I own the science, I declared, my voice ringing with power. I own the intellectual property. Zenith Nutrition owns nothing but a logo and a pile of debt. The product you launched tonight? It is stolen property, and as of this moment, I am issuing a cease and desist order on all production. Arthur let out a sound that was half groan, half sob. He knew what that meant. Without the IP, the company was worthless. The Sinclair money would vanish. The banks would seize everything. I resign, I said. Effective immediately. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open, the room flooded with blue and red lights. A team of 12 agents wearing FBI windbreakers marched in, followed by uniformed NYPD officers. I had timed the email perfectly. The evidence of wire fraud, embezzlement, and falsifying clinical trial data had hit the inbox of the district attorney exactly 45 minutes ago. Federal agents, a voice boomed. Nobody move. The security guards stepped back, hands raised. They weren't going to fight the feds for a family covered in vomit. The agents moved toward the stage, their noses wrinkling as they hit the wall of stench. Arthur Sterling, Victoria Sterling, Preston Sterling, the lead agent announced. You are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny, Victoria screamed as an officer approached her. She tried to stand up to maintain some dignity, but she slipped again. Flailing in the muck, the officer had to grab her by her arm, careful not to touch the rest of her. To hoist her up, I watched them being handcuffed. The metal cuffs clicked shut on Preston's wrists, the same wrists that had worn a $50,000 watch an hour ago. I turned to the camera one last time. The show is over, I said. Drive safely. I placed the microphone back on the stand. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I did not go out the back way. I walked right down the center stairs, into the audience. I had to step over Arthur, who was lying at the bottom of the steps, moaning in handcuffs. I didn't look down. I stepped over him like one steps over a puddle on a rainy day. The crowd parted for me. It was biblical. The Red Sea of tuxedos and ball gowns split wide open. These were the most powerful people in New York. Billionaires, media moguls, politicians, and they looked at me with a mixture of terrified awe and absolute respect. They shrank back, making a wide path. Not because I was dirty, but because I was radiating a power they couldn't comprehend. I was the woman who had burned the kingdom down and walked out without a soot stain on her white suit. I walked down the center aisle, my head held high. I could hear the cameras clicking furiously. I could hear the whispers. She killed them. She ended them. That was the most savage thing I have ever seen. I reached the double doors at the back of the room. An FBI agent held the door open for me. He looked at me, then back at the stage, then back at me. He nodded, a small gesture of recognition. "Ma'am," he said. "Officer," I replied. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air of New York City. The valet was waiting with my car. I handed him my ticket. My hands were steady. My heart was light. Behind me, the chaos was just beginning. The lawsuits, the bankruptcy, the prison sentences. But that was no longer my concern. I had balanced the equation. I had neutralized the threat. I was Priya Lancaster, and I was free. The fallout was not a ripple. It was a tsunami. In the age of digital information, The destruction of the Sterling dynasty did not take weeks or months. It took exactly 120 minutes. I watched it unfold from the quiet sanctuary of a hotel suite I had booked across town, sipping a chamomile tea while the world outside burned. The video of the Zenith disaster, as the press dubbed it, had been uploaded to every major platform within seconds of the broadcast cutting out. By midnight, it had accrued 45 million views. By the time the sun rose on Wednesday, that number had tripled. The hashtag Sterling a mess was trending #1 globally, beating out political scandals and natural disasters. It wasn't just the schadenfreude of watching rich people humiliate themselves. It was the catharsis. The internet, usually a fractured place, united in a collective roar of laughter and disgust. Memes of Preston wiping vomit from his mouth became instant currency. GIFs of Victoria slipping in her own hubris were shared in group chats from Tokyo to Toronto. The Zenith glow was no longer a beauty standard. It was a punchline for a gastrointestinal emergency. But the internet fame was just the noise. The real violence was happening in the financial markets. At 9:30 in the morning, when the New York Stock Exchange opened, Zenith Nutrition's ticker symbol might as well have been a tombstone. I had released the evidence of the fraud, the cooked books, the fake clinical trials, the massive debt, to the financial press the night before. The sell-off was instantaneous and brutal. Investors didn't just walk away, they ran. The stock price, which had closed at $112 on Tuesday, opened at $12 on Wednesday. By 11 in the morning, it was trading at pennies. The panicked sell orders were so voluminous that they triggered the market's automatic circuit breakers 3 times, halting trading to prevent a total systemic panic. But you cannot halt the truth. By noon, Zenith Nutrition was effectively a penny stock. And by 2 in the afternoon, it was delisted. The company's valuation, once boasted by Arthur to be in the billions, evaporated into the ether. The dominoes fell with a satisfying, rhythmic click. The Sinclair Group, led by Bella's father, Robert Sinclair, issued a press release at 10 o'clock. It was a masterpiece of corporate distancing. It stated that the Sinclair Group had no formal ties to Zenith Nutrition and that they were appalled by the revelations of fraud. They announced the immediate termination of the investment deal. The $50 million that was supposed to save the Sterlings never left the Texas bank account. Bella, the brand ambassador who had soiled herself on live television, fled the Pierre Hotel in a coat borrowed from a sympathetic janitor. She chartered a private jet back to Houston, expecting to find sanctuary in her father's estate. She found the gates locked. According to the tabloids, Robert Sinclair met her at the intercom. He told her that she had made the Sinclair name a laughingstock. He told her that the video of her on stage was unbecoming of a Sinclair woman. He cut off her credit cards, canceled her trust fund access, and told her to go fix her own mess. The Princess of Oil was left standing on the curb with nothing but a ruined dress and a hard lesson in conditional love. Back in New York, the legal machinery was grinding the Sterlings into dust. The FBI raid I had orchestrated was just the appetizer. The main course was the civil litigation. Within 48 hours, 5 separate class action lawsuits were filed against Zenith Nutrition. Customers who had bought the detox teas and brain force pills were suing for fraud, citing my leaked documents that proved the products were nothing more than caffeine and sawdust. The banks, realizing their collateral was now worthless, moved with predatory speed. They called in the loans, all of them. On Friday morning, a sheriff's deputy arrived at the Sterling estate in Connecticut. He wasn't there to make an arrest. He was there to serve an eviction notice. The mansion, the yacht, the summer house in the Hamptons, it was all leveraged. And now, it was all property of the bank. I saw the photos in the Daily Mail. There was a shot of Victoria Sterling, wearing oversized sunglasses and a tracksuit, carrying a box of personal items out of the front door of the house she had ruled like a queen. She looked small. She looked shrunken. The caption read, "The Fall of the House of Sterling. Matriarch. Evicted." They were forced to move into a 2-bedroom rental apartment in Queens, a neighborhood Victoria had once described as industrial. It was a 4th-floor walk-up with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall. There was no staff, no chef, no driver, just 4 disgraced people and the crushing weight of their own failure. The psychological toll was immediate. Victoria, stripped of her wealth and her public image, suffered a complete nervous breakdown. She couldn't leave the apartment because she was convinced people were smelling her. The phantom scent of the stage haunted her. She spent her days scrubbing her skin raw, muttering about purity and toxins. The irony was poetic. She had spent her life selling fake cures for imaginary toxins, and now she was consumed by a toxicity she couldn't wash off. Preston tried to fight. He tried to be the man he thought he was, but without his father's money and his mother's connections. He was just a 30-year-old man with no skills and a criminal record pending. He tried to call me. I watched my phone light up on Saturday night. Preston calling. I didn't answer. I let it ring. He called again, and again. Then came the texts. Priya, please, we need to talk. It was all a mistake. I was pressured by Dad. We have no money for a lawyer. You have to help us. I still love you. We can fix this. I read them with the detached interest of an anthropologist studying a dying species. The audacity was breathtaking. He actually thought that the bond of marriage, a bond he had planned to sever with a signature and a security guard, was strong enough to save him now. I blocked the number. Then, I went to war. I didn't just want them broken. I wanted them legally dismantled. My lawyer, a shark of a woman named Elena, whom I had hired with the bonus money I had secretly saved over the years, filed for divorce on Monday. The grounds were adultery, emotional abuse, and fraud. We didn't just ask for a separation, we asked for everything. I presented the court with the ultrasound of Bella's child. I presented the emails where Preston discussed hiding assets. I presented the video footage of his verbal abuse. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had clearly seen the viral video, was not sympathetic to the Sterlings. The proceedings were swift. Since the prenuptial agreement was found to be signed under fraudulent pretenses, Preston had hidden assets and debts even back then. It was voided. I was awarded half of the remaining liquid assets. It wasn't much, given the bankruptcy, but I managed to secure something far more valuable: the rights. The court ruled that since the patents for the Zenith Glow and Vitality formulas were registered in my name, and since Zenith Nutrition had breached my employment contract by failing to pay me royalties, full ownership of the intellectual property reverted to me. I walked out of that courtroom with the formulas that were worth millions. Preston walked out with a court-appointed debt consolidation plan and a scheduled hearing for his fraud trial. The cultural impact of the Sterling mess lingered long after the smell faded. The story of the clothes, the walk-in closet that was emptied to make room for a mistress, touched a nerve in the American psyche. It became a modern parable. On TikTok, women started posting videos of their own closets with the caption, "Don't pull a Sterling on me." It became shorthand for a specific type of betrayal, the kind where a partner tries to erase you before they even leave you. I saw op-eds in the New York Times discussing the invisible labor of the wife and how the Sterling case highlighted the way women's contributions are often cannibalized by their partners. I was no longer just a victim. I was a symbol. I was the woman who bit back, but I had no interest in being a symbol. I wanted to be a builder. 6 months after the event, while Preston was negotiating a plea deal that would see him serve 3 years in a minimum security prison for wire fraud, I broke ground on my new facility. I didn't call it Zenith. That name was dead, buried under a mountain of excrement and shame. I called it Lancaster Bioscience. I used the settlement money and the capital I raised from investors who were practically begging to work with the genius behind the curtain, to buy a sleek, modern laboratory in Boston. I hired a team of female scientists, many of whom had been overlooked or marginalized in their previous roles. We weren't selling magic pills. We weren't selling detox scams. We were selling actual, clinical science. My first product was a reformulated version of the skin serum. Marketed honestly as a high-grade dermatological treatment, it sold out in 48 hours. The marketing campaign was simple. No models, no influencers, just me, in my white lab coat, looking directly at the camera. The tagline was, "Science, not secrets." I sat in my new office, overlooking the Charles River. The furniture was mine, the clothes in the closet, a spacious, organized walk-in I had designed myself, were mine. There were no neon dresses, no leopard print, just tailored suits in shades of power, navy, black, and white. I received a letter from prison a week after the launch. It was from Preston. It was a pathetic, rambling screed about how hard his life was, how the food was terrible, and how he missed my cooking. He asked if I could put some money in his commissary account because he needed toiletries. I didn't burn the letter. That would be dramatic. And I was done with drama. I simply put it in the shredder. I watched the paper turn into confetti, just like his life had. I turned back to my computer. I had work to do. There was a new formula I was developing, a cognitive enhancer for women suffering from stress. I was going to make a fortune. And this time, the name on the patent would be the only one that mattered. Priya Lancaster. The revenge was complete. But the real victory wasn't that they had lost everything. It was that I had found myself, and I discovered that I liked her very much. 6 months is not a long time in the grand scheme of the universe, but in the timeline of a human life, it can be an entire epic. It had been exactly 180 days since I walked out of the Pierre Hotel, leaving the Sterling dynasty drowning in their own filth. Since then, the seasons had changed, the winter frost had melted, giving way to a tentative spring, and now, the full, humid bloom of summer was upon us. It felt appropriate. My life, too, had thawed and bloomed into something unrecognizable. I was standing in the lobby of the Lancaster Center for Holistic Health. It was the opening day. The space was nothing like the cold, sterile laboratories of Zenith. Nor was it like the gilded, suffocating opulence of the Sterling mansion. It was open, filled with natural light, living plants, and the sound of running water. We did not sell miracles here. We did not sell quick fixes or detox pills that were actually industrial pipe cleaners. We sold therapy, nutritional counseling based on actual blood work, and dermatological treatments that respected the skin barrier rather than nuking it. I checked my reflection in the glass doors. I was wearing a suit of deep emerald green. It was tailored to perfection, hugging a body that was no longer rigid with stress. I looked healthy, I looked wealthy, but most importantly, I looked like myself. Dr. Lancaster? My assistant, a bright young woman named Sarah, approached me. She looked uncomfortable. "There is a man outside asking to see you. He says he knows you. He says well. He says he is your husband," I corrected her gently. "Ex-husband. Sarah. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago." "Right," she nodded. "I told him you were busy, but he is refusing to leave. He is making a scene. Should I call security?" I looked through the glass doors to the street. I saw him, Preston Sterling. He was standing on the sidewalk, arguing with the doorman. Even from this distance, the decline was shocking. The man who used to spend $500 on a haircut now looked like he had taken a pair of kitchen scissors to his own scalp. His suit was ill-fitting, likely bought off the rack at a discount store, the fabric shimmering with cheap polyester. He had lost weight, but not in a healthy way. He looked gaunt, his skin gray and pasty, a stark irony for a man who had spent his life selling vitality. "No," I said to Sarah. "Let him in. Bring him to my office." Sarah looked worried. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," I said. "I have one last piece of business to conclude with Mr. Sterling." I walked to my office at the back of the center. It was a beautiful room, overlooking the city skyline. I sat behind my desk, a solid slab of reclaimed oak, and waited. A moment later, the door opened. Preston walked in. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room. I saw the old calculation in his gaze. He was pricing the furniture. He was estimating the square footage. He was smelling the money. For a second, a flicker of the old arrogance returned to his face, but it was quickly replaced by a performance of humility that was painful to watch. "Priya," he said. His voice was raspy. "You look incredible." "I know," I said. I didn't offer him a seat. He shuffled forward, wringing his hands. "It has been so hard. Priya, you have no idea. The lawyers took everything. Dad is in a state facility awaiting trial. Mom is not doing well. She just sits in the dark." "I read the papers, Preston," I said calmly. "I know. I missed you," he said, trying to summon a tear. I realized, sitting in that terrible apartment, that I made a mistake, a huge mistake. It was never about Bella. You know that, right? It was the pressure. Dad forced me. I was weak, but I kicked her out. Priya, Bella is gone. I told her I didn't want her money. I wanted my wife. It was a lie, of course. Bella had been disowned by her father and had likely dumped Preston the moment the money ran dry, but I let him speak. "I want to come home. Priya," he continued, taking a step closer. "I want us to start over. Look at what you have built. We could run this together, just like the old days. You the brains, me the face. We were a good team." I looked at him. I looked at the fraying cuffs of his shirt. I looked at the desperation sweating from his pores. He really believed it. He believed that his charm was a currency that had not been devalued. He believed that I was just a placeholder for his ambition, waiting to be reactivated. "You want to start over?" I asked. "Yes," he breathed, hope lighting up his eyes. "I forgive you, Priya. For the humiliating video, for the lawsuit, I forgive it all. We can put it behind us." "You forgive me?" I repeated, tasting the absurdity of the words. "Yes," he nodded eagerly. "I am willing to move past it. I am ready to come back." I stood up. I walked around the desk. Preston smiled, opening his arms, expecting an embrace. I walked past him. I went to a closet in the corner of the room. I opened it and pulled out a black plastic garbage bag. It was cheap, thin, and lumpy. I carried it back to him and held it out. "Here," I said. He looked at the bag, confused. "What is this? A gift?" "Open it," I said. He took the bag. He untied the knot. As the plastic opened, a smell wafted out. It was the smell of damp earth, mildew, and stale perfume. Preston reached in and pulled out a handful of fabric. It was a gray wool blazer, my blazer, the one his mother had thrown out 6 months ago. It was stained with mud and chewed by moths. Next, he pulled out a silk blouse, now ruined and stiff with dirt. "I don't understand," he said, recoiling from the smell. "These are old clothes." "They are my clothes," I said. "The ones your mother threw into a dumpster to make room for your mistress." I hired a private investigator to track down the donation bin she claimed to have used. Turns out, she didn't donate them. She had the staff throw them in the estate's compactor. I paid a sanitation worker $500 to retrieve them before they were incinerated. I needed them as evidence for the divorce proceedings. Preston dropped the blazer on the floor. "Why are you giving me this trash?" "Because," I said, leaning against my desk, crossing my arms. "You said you wanted to come back. You said you wanted what we had. Well, this is what we had. Preston, this is how you treated me. You threw me away like garbage the moment you thought you found something shinier." I pointed to the pile of dirty laundry at his feet. "Do you remember this?" I asked softly. "This is all you deserve. You do not get the new Priya. You do not get the Lancaster fortune. You get the trash you created." His face crumpled. The hope vanished, replaced by a dark, ugly anger. "You bitch," he spat. "You think you are so high and mighty. You are nothing without the sterling name. You are just a bitter, vindictive woman." "And you," I countered, "are trespassing." "I am not leaving until I get what is mine," he shouted, his voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "I am entitled to spousal support. I helped build your career." Actually, I said, glancing at my watch, you really should be leaving. You have an appointment. What appointment? He sneered. At your new residence, I said. I walked to my desk and picked up a glossy brochure. I handed it to him. The cover read, The Sterling Institute for Behavioral Rehabilitation. He looked at the photo on the brochure. His eyes went wide. His jaw dropped. It was a picture of the Sterling Mansion in Connecticut, his childhood home. What is this? He whispered. I bought it, I said casually. Through a shell company. I picked it up at the foreclosure auction for pennies on the dollar. Nobody wanted it. Apparently, the smell from the party lingered in the carpets. Preston turned pale. You bought my house? And I repurposed it, I explained. It is now a residential treatment facility. Specifically, it is a rehab center for people suffering from delusional narcissism and social media addiction. I thought it was poetic, a place where people who are obsessed with their image can go to learn how to live in reality. I smiled, a genuine, sharp smile. I named it after your family, to honor your legacy. Preston made a sound like a wounded animal. He crumpled the brochure in his hand. You can't do this. That is my home. Not anymore, I said. Now, it is a tax write-off for my company. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Sarah, please send in security. 2 large men in uniforms appeared at the door almost instantly. They looked at Preston, then at me. Please escort Mr. Sterling out, I said, and make sure he takes his bag. One of the guards picked up the black trash bag and shoved it into Preston's chest. Let's go, buddy. No, Preston screamed, flailing as they grabbed his arms. Priya, you can't do this. I love you. I love you. You love my money, I corrected. Goodbye, Preston. They dragged him out. He dug his heels into the carpet, screaming and cursing, a chaotic mess of polyester and regret. I watched him go. I watched the man who had once held my heart in his hands being hauled away like a bag of refuse. When the elevator doors finally closed on his screaming face, silence rushed back into the room. It was a beautiful, heavy silence. I walked to the window and opened the glass door to the balcony. I stepped out into the warm summer air. Below me, the city was alive. I could hear the hum of traffic, the distant sound of a siren, the chatter of people on the street. I looked down and saw Preston being deposited on the sidewalk. He stood there for a moment, clutching the trash bag, yelling at the building. Then, people started to stare. He realized he was being watched. He shrank into himself, turned, and walked away, disappearing into the anonymity of the crowd. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of exhaust fumes and hot asphalt and blooming jasmine from the planter box on my railing. It was the sweetest thing I had ever smelled. I had done it. I had not just survived. I had rewritten the ending. I had taken the poison they forced down my throat and turned it into medicine. I had detoxed my life of the Sterlings, the lies, and the insecurity. I looked at my hands. They were steady. They were the hands of a creator. I turned my back on the street, on Preston, on the past. I walked back into my office, ready to get to work. My next client was waiting, and I had so much more to give. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a wild journey of revenge, justice, and claiming one's own power, and I'm so grateful you stuck with Priya until the very end. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from right now? Are you tuning in from a busy subway in New York, a quiet room in London, or maybe somewhere sunny in Vietnam? Let's get a conversation going down below. If you enjoyed seeing the Sterlings get exactly what they deserved, please do me a huge favor. Subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel so you never miss a new story. Hit that like button if you think Priya is a queen. And please smash that hype button to help this video get discovered by more people. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong, stay drama-free, and I will see you in the next story.